Welcome to We Learn Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 11th of the subject The Study of Society, and the chapter is Educational Institutions. The topics to be covered are Education and Inequality, Educational Profession, and Discrimination in Education. Education and Inequality. It is equally important to remember that the educational system itself is not free from inequalities. In Britain, there is a link between education in one of the expensive, fee-paying public schools and admission to the renowned universities of Oxford and Cambridge and access to top professional and management jobs. A small percentage of Britons control the share market as well as dominate in a number of other occupational fields as well. So in Britain, there is a link between education in one of the expensive fee-paying public schools and also the top universities and management jobs. Primary schools. According to recent figures, there are 6.9 lakh educational institutions in the country. Over 70% of these are primary schools. These are funded by the government, municipal corporations and private bodies. The largest number of these institutions are funded and run by the government. Government support to schools does not guarantee students access to higher education, much of which is also funded by the government. So whenever government provides support to schools in the form of financial aids, it does not in a way guarantee the student would get higher education as well. The majority of Indian children go to government and municipal schools, but only a few find their way to college and professional institutions. The 55 odd public schools, modeled after their British counterparts, teach their students horse riding and archery, chess and photography in picturesque surroundings and amidst much luxury. So, these schools are also based on the British model of education, which teach them the sports of horse riding, archery and chess, and also give them world-class education. The government is supposedly opposed to the perpetuation of privilege through high fee-paying private schools. However, these Navodaya Vidyalayas are doing precisely this, except that their catchment area is somewhat different. The powerful landed elite in rural areas who had so far felt discriminated against by the educational system are now being provided with prestigious education for their children. So powerful landed elite who have been discriminated against by the educational system are now providing prestigious education for their children. Educational profession. In the late 20th century, the situation is somewhat different. The social base of those to be educated is being increasingly widened, while teachers tend to come from the hardcore of the middle classes. Most of the teachers come from the middle classes, hardcore middle classes, and the social base of those to be educated is also getting widened and broadened. In India, students in elite privately run schools have more facilities than those studying in government and municipal schools. So students who are studying in private elite run schools, they have more facilities, they have more interactive methods of teaching rather than the government and municipal schools. This is also true of the extent of teacher involvement and identification with students and their problems. So this is also true with the way the teacher interacts with her students in the class and how she identifies and solves their problems in the classrooms as well. Studies on teachers. Comparative studies of teachers in urban, private and government schools have indicated that the former find it easier to identify with their students. Teachers in urban, private schools find it easier to identify with the students and solve their queries as well. In the government schools, lower middle class and middle class teachers are keen to maintain their distance from their students, most of whom are from the working class. So in the government schools, lower middle class and the middle class teachers are also keen to maintain their distance from those students who are belonging from the working class or who are belonging from the class where the parents are working and also they don't have much interaction with them. The usual reaction of teachers interviewed in the government schools is that their students are stupid, ignorant and cunning. So the teachers say in the government schools say that their students are not intelligent, they are cunning, ignorant and stupid. Studies on teachers. Studies from USA and Britain have shown how race and ethnicity become vital elements in the teacher assessment of students. Often these are not borne out by objective intelligence tests. A British study established that middle class teachers tended to favor the more neatly dressed children as well as those whom they felt came from better homes. So the middle class teachers, it was conducted by a British study, that the middle class teachers tended to favor neatly dressed children and also children who came from better homes and families rather than who came from lower homes or the families. This labeling can be harmful as students themselves soon internalize the stereotypes which teachers have developed of them. This labeling and this discrimination or this unfair treatment is also harmful for the students because they very soon realize and internalize these stereotypes, and also it may develop their performance in the class. Education and teachers. In the black area of Harlem in New York City, it was found that teachers were systematically imposing white values, culture and language on her students. If children were unable to adapt to this essentially alien way of life, they were treated as potential failures. Teachers who were the primary agents in superimposing this culture were fully convinced of the importance of their role. So basically, the teachers, they were imposing the white values, the culture of the people of the Western culture, language as well as values, and when children were not able to adapt to them, they were considered failures and they were not given any place in the class. So teachers were themselves superimposing this culture. In India, where the majority of the country's children up to the age of 14 years come from underprivileged homes and share little in common with either their teacher or the formal school curriculum, the problem is more of neglect. So more of these students from underprivileged homes, when they come, they are neglected, and sometimes formal school curriculum or formal school education is also not provided to them. If the child was able to accept the middle class ways of life as taught in school, the chances of social and occupational mobility would perhaps be much greater. Achievement in school. In India, where the problem of school dropouts is admitted to be intractable, it is essential to carry out further research into the role of the teacher and curricula in the educational system and also the child's alienation from the system. In India, where the school dropout ratio is increasing and also where there is school absenteeism, so the teachers need to find out the reasons for this, and also the curriculum has to be checked and research has to be gone into it, and also the reasons are needed to be checked, that why is child alienating from the school. A high opportunity cost will take children away from school. So will the attitudes of parents who felt that teachers and school administration are unsympathetic. Sometimes parents also tell their students to drop out from the school because sometimes they don't have enough funds, and they find that administration and teachers are unsympathetic to their wards. Writing textbooks. It's now being increasingly recognized that the textbook, whether it teaches English or mathematics, can, through the use of characters and symbols in certain situations, become a powerful medium for the perpetuation of stereotypes and role models. Even the textbooks which teach English or mathematics with the help of symbols, roles and characters, it can be a powerful medium to tell someone of the stereotypes and the role models. In the 13 English language textbooks published by the Central Institute of English, Hyderabad, boy-centered stories outnumbered girl-centered ones by 81 to 9. So the boy-centered stories were more than the girl-centered stories in the Central Institute of English who were there, and in the 13 English language textbooks were published by them. Writing textbooks. The Handbook for Mathematics demonstrates how change in attitudes can be introduced through a supposedly gender-specific subject. Earlier in the textbook, pro-male gender biases were depicted. At present, gender-neutral problems are asked to solve. For example, suggested problems ask students of class 3rd to work out how much Lakshman had in his bank account before he distributed equal sums to his daughter and to his son. At the middle school level, ratios, graphs, and equations are introduced through the biographical details of women scientists and mathematicians. So basically, through the biographical details of women scientists and mathematicians, at the middle level, ratios, graphs, and bars are helpful in taking out the details. The originators of these innovative handbooks are well aware of the fact that unless the teachers are convinced of the need to teach more imaginatively, children will concentrate on the solution only and not on the text. So, unless and until the methodology, the way with which the teachers teach, unless the teachers teach in an innovative, imaginative manner, the students will not be able to concentrate on what is happening but only on the end result, that is the examinations. Textbook writers themselves are singularly resistant to change as they feel that radical deviations would clearly disturb the well-entrenched expectations of both the school community as well as the family. So the textbook writers also say that they also feel that radical changes or radical deviations might also disturb the expectations of the school as well as the family. Discrimination in education. Irrespective of the level of education being considered, Indian boys have an advantage over girls in terms of access, retention, and the future use of their training. So basically, boys are given more access, facilities, retention, and the training part as well. There is a distinct dividing line between the high status of relatively few medical colleges, institutes of technology, management, and engineering, and the bulk of higher education consisting of the proliferating degree colleges, polytechnics and technical institutes. There are a lot of medical colleges, institutes of technology, engineering, higher education, colleges, polytechnics and technical institutes through which education can be gained. But boys have better access to the education. This is how discrimination in education also exists. The dual system of higher education, which separates a select, self-perpetuating elite from the majority trained in different institutions, is divided not only on the basis of socio-economic status but also on the basis of sex, in which through whether the person is a boy or a girl, in that way also discrimination is done. In male-dominated society, the stress imposed on boys by the syndrome of achievement, examination and selection is not inconsequential, yet there is a commitment to getting into and in succeeding in wider range of courses through open competition. Open competition is there amongst the boys and the syndrome of achievement and selection is also very well inbuilt in them. Various disciplines. There is an assumption that girls are better at some things than at others. Of equal importance is the labeling of male-dominated disciplines associated with science, mathematics, engineering as more prestigious and requiring a high level of intelligence. So all these disciplines, mathematics, engineering, science, they are given much more male-dominated values and they are considered labeled as male-dominated disciplines. A limited number of institutions specializing in these areas, access to which is determined by highly competitive entrance examinations, serve to create an elite crops in higher education. So basically, limited number of institutions or institutes are specializing in these areas and access to which is determined by only highly competitive entrance examinations which only wanted or which only produced elite crops in higher education. Under the old scheme, schools can continue to offer home science and arts for girls rather than science and mathematics. A recent study of Delhi schools indicated that while girls constituted about 60% of the arts stream and about 30% in the science and commerce stream, over 40% flocked to the relatively new vocational streams. So new vocational courses, over 40% girls went there as well. Science and gender. Two important questions need to be asked. Firstly, how many girls who fare well in science at the class 10th examinations do in fact opt for it at the plus 2 stage? Secondly, how many of those who offer science for the final school leaving examination continue with it or with related subjects at the degree level? So very less girls or very less students actually take science courses at the degree or at the plus 2 stage. Classroom observations of teacher trainees show that these girls are quiet and reserved and non-participants. While they were diligent about their homework and performed well in unit tests, they rarely took part in discussions which were dominated by the boys. So whatever discussions, whatever interactions, whatever group discussions were held in the class, that was only dominated and that was only participated by the boys. Although girls were quiet, non-participants and they only performed well in homeworks and the tests. A principal of a leading co-educational school in Delhi commented that most girls who did take up science hoped to become doctors. The majority of those who were not successful in the pre-medical tests went in for home science, natural sciences, biochemistry or switched to art subjects. Scheduled castes and tribes. A case study of 13 SCs and ST students admitted to the BTech course at the IIT Bombay in 1973 found that only 5 were still enrolled at the end of the second year. Reservation of seats provides the opportunity for a small percentage of the scheduled caste to compete with a large majority who remain outside the system. So reservation also helps the SCs and STs to compete with the other class. The distribution of scarce resources within a large community has certain side effects, and the better organized and politically more powerful scheduled castes take the lion's share of seats. So basically, powerful scheduled caste on which reservation is there, they take the lion's share of seats, and also scarce resources are left for the large general community. Education and voluntary organizations. Voluntary organizations, women's groups and others have been concerned with making non-formal education more relevant. This is not always easy in a situation where the education is barely trained to teach differently. So basically voluntary organizations are there, women groups are there, other educational groups are there who are concerned with making non-formal education more relevant, and they are making efforts to integrate it into mainstream so as to make it a main subjects of studies. So this was all about education, discrimination in education, gender bias in education, and also the concept of reservation. So these are some of the questions. You have to do it yourself. Question number 1, how does inequality enter into primary educational institutions? And write a note on education and values. Thank you. Happy learning. We learning.